Hey everybody, Shane here, Shoebox Legends. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. It's about 10 degrees outside as I record this morning, and it feels like perfect weather for a hockey card episode. So that's what we're going to do today. I want to highlight a small handful of favorite cards of mine featuring one of the greats of the game from the 70s and 80s, Guy Lafleur. So we'll talk about those towards the end of the video. Before we get to that, I have a few pickups that I've made in the recent past on the hockey front that I want to show off, get those put away. And really, all of this and my love of hockey goes all the way back to the late 1980s when I was first learning to skate and learning to play the game as a youth hockey player. And then specifically in the winter of 1989, my dad would bring home packs just like the one you see at the right there for my brothers and I as a way to kind of reward us for good behavior or doing well in school. He would stop on his way home from work, get a few packs, divvy them out amongst us, and we would sit there at the table, ripping the packs, chewing the gum, reading the card backs and using them to learn more about the game, laughing at the photos, trading, sorting them all away in our binders, and they were just really great memories. And little did my dad know that doing that kind of sparked an interest and was the catalyst to my love of the hobby, which continues all the way to present day, now more than 35 years later. So let's get to some of the recent pickups without further ado. First up, another addition to my insert set build of the immortalized insert set from 2013 Panini Prism Hockey. Trying to collect all 20 of these, but specifically in this silver or prism, which is basically like a refractor version of the card. Has that incredible etching on the Stanley Cup. And Phil Esposito here, one of the all-time Boston Bruins greats, is my 19th card out of 20 that I've acquired. So I am only missing now Jonathan Quick, goaltender for the LA Kings. There is sort of an overpriced copy up on eBay, and I've thought more than once in the recent past about just slamming buy it now, just so that I can put this project to rest and pay a few bucks more for that card. If and when I do that, I will certainly show off the complete set here on the channel and maybe do a little video about those inserts. But for today, just the Phil Esposito. And then the rest of these are a small handful of buybacks that I've acquired. I've mentioned a few times how really in the past calendar year, I've sold off the majority of my upper deck hockey buybacks to a private, through private sales to a private collector. I've sold, I'd say 80% of those in this calendar year. But I have been picking up more of the pro set buybacks that were put out back in 2020. And I landed this one recently. This one is a Chem, originally from the 1991 Pro Set release, and then done up as part of the 2020 buyback program. This is a gold foil copy 1 of 5. You can see it there. This is the Play Smart Patrick Waugh card. And he is, of course, arguably, and I think in my opinion, the greatest goaltender in the history of the game. And this is one of those cards that was kind of aimed at kids back in the day. You know, this is a time when the hobby was very much about children and kids. And in a lot of the releases, you would find cards like this that, discourage drug use or encourage you to stay in school or keep studying. And on the back of this one, I'll show it here in case you want to pause and read, but basically just a couple of quotes from Patrick Waugh talking about, the importance of education in his life and how he always loved learning and applying himself in school. So I think this is funny and kind of a sign of the times. To be honest, when I was like a 9-year-old, 8, 9-year-old, this would have been one of my least favorite cards to pull out of the pack because I would have felt kind of like, where's the real Patrick Waugh card? I would have preferred that. But now as an adult, I really appreciate like the spirit behind this card. And like I said, kind of a cool sign of the times and a telltale sign that the hobby was much different, 35 years ago, back in 1991, than it looks to be heading into 2026 here. So great Patrick Waugh card there. And then the other buybacks I have, they're from the same Pro Set release and from the same buyback program, except that these are the red 1 of 1s. So there are 2 flavors available. There's the gold stamp buyback numbered to 5, and then each card also has a red 1 of 1. And I've managed to acquire 4 Hartford Whalers 1 of 1s. So you can see the red stamp there at the upper right with the 1 of 1 stamping on it. First up, we have winger Todd Krieger. This guy was a speed demon. He never really caught on too well in Hartford. Was only here for, I think, a couple of seasons, if memory serves. Moved on to maybe the Capitals and other teams, but Any Hartford Whalers 1-of-1 is just going to be incredibly attractive to me. I did not pay a significant amount of money for these cards, under 20 bucks each. And, you can laugh about that if you want, but I am like the ultimate Hartford Whalers fan. My family and I would go every year back in the day to see some games at the Civic Center in downtown Hartford. We were members, my brothers and I, of the Junior Whalers Club. And I did hockey training camps with some of the Whalers, and anything, involving Whalers hockey, we just ate it up. Here's Jim McKenzie. He was kind of an enforcer type on the team. My dad, if he watches this, he'll get a kick out of this one. I know he remembers Jim McKenzie. But again, the 1-of-1 buyback there. And all 4 of these were from the 91-92 release, just like that Play Smart Patrick Waugh. Next up, we've got Randy Cunnyworth. And it looks like facing the New Jersey Devils there, maybe. You can see a little bit of the goalie on the right there, but this would have been a shot taken in Hartford. Back in this era, the home teams wore the white uniforms. It has since been reversed, and the road teams now wear the white, but that would have been a Civic Center shot, as would this one, Mikhail Anderson. So pretty awesome to get 4 1-of-1s from my favorite defunct team. 3 of those, believe it or not, actually came from ComC, and then I snagged the 4th on eBay. So really, really pumped. I've got a somewhat extensive Hartford Whalers buyback collection. And even with all the selling that I did in the last year, I did not sell any of my Whalers buybacks. So maybe I'll do a whole video, breakdown on that someday. But for today, let's call it there on the new pickups. And let's get into the main subject of the video, the Great Guy Lafleur. Now, I mentioned, my first foray into hockey cards were the 89-90 packs. And I actually still have my original childhood album. And I went through it before the video and pulled this card out. So this card here was literally my very first exposure to Guy Lafleur. And you can see here, he was an aged, by this point, forward for the New York Rangers, skating around there without his helmet. So this is how I first, got to know Guy. Because again, I was a young kid just learning the game. There was no internet. And hockey cards were my way of learning about these guys. So I could tell he was important. After all, look at the back of this card. Look at those point totals. I mean, it's going to be a little bit hard to make out, but you get the gist. Just like in baseball, you can tell, by looking here, this guy's been in the league a long time and experienced a lot of success. And so I was intrigued by Guy Lafleur. But to be honest with you, I was more intrigued as a young kid just by his kind of name that sticks out or is memorable, and the fact that he was skating around here with no helmet on. And so a little bit of a backstory on Lafleur. We'll enjoy my childhood original up here in the background while I talk. But he is most famously known, of course, as I now know as an adult, as being a member of the Montreal Canadiens. So he was an early draft pick for the Canadiens. In fact, they traded up to be able to draft him. He was a Quebec native and sort of a Canadian son, when he joined the team. Somebody who the entire nation really looked up to and respected. He joined them in the early 70s. Took a couple of years for him to really find his footing in the NHL, which is not abnormal for young players. By the early to mid 70s, he really started to hit his stride, and he became one of the premier offensive players in the league. In fact, he would become the first player to score 50 goals in 6 consecutive seasons during the 70s. He was part of 5 Stanley Cup winning teams for the Canadiens. And of course, you know what hockey means up in Canada, and you know what it means for the Montreal Canadiens to be successful and win a Stanley Cup. He was a large reason that the Canadiens turned into a dynasty in the 70s. They won 1 cup in the early 70s, and then they won 4 consecutive Stanley Cups to close out the decade. So wanted to have at least one nice, I do have a handful, but the one I chose for today's video, one nice Guy Lafleur card representing his time with Montreal. And the one that I have to show is a great one. This is his rookie card from 1971-72 O-Pee-Chee Hockey, Guy Lafleur. Now, this card is great for a couple of reasons. First of all, I love the design and the bold colors. 71 Topps and O-Pee-Chee Hockey is one of my favorite vintage hockey releases. Just look at the bubble lettering here, the kind of purple color on the yellow background with the red jersey and all. It's, very, very sharp, I guess, in its contrast. And it almost reminds me, like the colors are so odd and weird that it's got a little bit of a 90 Topps baseball vibe to it, which I always loved. Just really, really dig these. And the other thing that's cool about this card, he is not in the top set in 1971. So Topps and O-Pee-Chee put out very similar sets with very similar checklists throughout the 70s and 80s. However, the O-Pee-Chee set would have a larger checklist, and there would always be players who were only included in O-Pee-Chee and were not present in Topps. That was the case for Guy Lafleur in 1971. So this is his only like real mainstream rookie card. There is no Topps version of this, only O-Pee-Chee. Here is the back, just fantastic. I love that they made room for cartoons on these. Really awesome. This guy had a couple of nicknames in Canada. The obvious one was the Flower, which is just a direct translation of his last name, Lafleur. The one I like even better, he was referred to as the Demon Blonde, which is hilarious to me. He was really, the 70s were a wild time in both the US and Canada, and he really embraced that in terms of like the culture, the way he dressed. You can see like his sideburns here. He was a very like slick player who was a great like media personality and really drew fans and was really appreciated and loved. He was a little bit of a kind of a sloppy player in that, he would go so far on the offensive side of the game that he'd make the occasional, defensive mistake or lapse that would cost the team. But I mean, you can't argue with the results. As I said, first straight, sixth season in a row, 50-goal scorer, 5 Stanley Cups, and just an absolute legend. He was actually a heavy smoker, and unfortunately, lung cancer did play a part in his eventual passing a couple of years ago now. But again, a sign of the times, you would have these athletes that would go out there and, score a hat trick, have an amazing game, and then he'd be sitting on the stool at his locker after the game, just smoking a cigarette, talking to the press. So just a wild personality. But fast forward, kind of bridge the gap between the Guy Lafleur of the Montreal Canadiens that most people know, the champion and one of the best players on ice. He won multiple scoring titles with the Canadiens and an MVP as well, and just an all-time great, like I said. But transitioning from that Guy Lafleur to this Guy Lafleur that I got to know in the late 80s, how did that happen? Well, basically, he lasted with Montreal through the mid-80s. Then he got into some disagreements with his coach, who was actually a former line mate of his, Jacques Lemaire, and things kind of fell apart. His production was declining. He was getting older, and he demanded to be traded. The Canadiens didn't want to trade him because they were afraid of how it would look, to deal away like a franchise icon like that. And so long story short, he decided to retire. And he was only like, I think maybe 34, 35 years old, maybe 35 when he retired, and walked away from the game to kind of spite the Canadiens. It was sort of an ungraceful ending to a wonderful career. However, after a few years away, he decided to unretire and return to the game of hockey. And that's where this card comes in and my familiarity with him. He joined the New York Rangers for the 88-89 season, played just 1 year in New York. It was the year prior to this card coming out. So you have his complete New York Rangers statistics along the bottom of this card. Scored 18 goals, even as an aging veteran just returning to the game. And I know you won't be able to see this well due to the small font, but he had a 3-year break. So he finished with the Canadiens in 84-85 and then did not return to the Rangers, like I said, until 88-89. So to be able to step away from pro sports at that age in your mid-30s and take a break for a few years, come back and still be an effective player is really something. And the other thing, it's kind of embarrassing now that this is why he stood out to me as a kid. But when you're 7, you notice what you notice. And what I thought was funny is he didn't wear a helmet. And that's because he had been around so long that when he returned in his second stint, he was still allowed to kind of be subject to the grandfather clause that allowed players that had been around since like the early 70s to finish out their career without a helmet, even though all new players entering the league had to wear a helmet. So this guy played his entire NHL career helmetless, which is wild. And it's also known and been talked about by some of his competitors that he barely wore shoulder pads or wore like the smallest little shoulder pads you could imagine. So yeah, certainly a couple of things that would not fly in today's game, but just a fascinating personality. So to close it out, I have just a couple of other cards that I want to look at of Guy Lafleur. and then we'll bring this video to a close. And these are going to be from the era that I'm more familiar with, but with a twist. And we're going back to Pro Set from the same set and from the same buyback program as all the ones that we looked at a few moments ago. I was recently able to secure this card, his All-Star card. How awesome is that? So in his final season in 1990-91, he was voted as an All-Star. Really, I think as kind of a tip of the cap to his amazing career and sort of a way to be honored by the fans in the game. And this card, which came out the season following that, shows him in that final All-Star appearance. And I think this is also kind of his final card in a standard issue. Most of his final cards came the year prior in 1990-91, but he did get this one card as a nod to his All-Star selection the following year. This popped up recently in buyback format, numbered to 5, and I knew I had to go at it hard, and amazingly it finished for I think under $10. Definitely one of my cheap favorite pickups of the year. Love that Guy Lafleur and the memories that that one evokes. But even cooler than that, I have also his Pro Set buyback from the year prior, which is his final base card and his only real base card in a Pro Set release. And this is when he was with the Quebec Nordiques. So like I said, he lasted just 1 year with the Rangers in 88-89, and then he finished out his career with 2 seasons with the Quebec Nordiques, which is very fitting as he was a Quebec native, born and bred. And love the photo on this, love the prominent Nordiques logo on the uniform there. Love the team color matching design on this first Pro Set release, and I'm really, really honored to have one of the 5 copies of his lone Pro Set base card in buyback format. Picked this one up a couple of years ago when a big seller in Canada did a mass break of this product, and they were listing a ton of the buybacks, and really, really honored to have this Guy Lafleur. I am more proud of this buyback card, believe it or not, than the rookie. I can find that rookie card with relative ease, although getting a centered one is not easy, but these buybacks are just impossible. And then 2 more, and we'll wrap it up here. I mentioned that I sold the majority of my Upper Deck buybacks, but I didn't sell this one. Had to hang on to the Guy Lafleur, again, his lone Upper Deck base card. He has some tribute cards and other things, but this was, again, representing his season with the Nordiques in 90-91, and this is a 20th anniversary stamped buyback. So this came out in the 2010 Upper Deck French release, and it's an original 90-91 Upper Deck card, stamped and then repack issued as a buyback. What's cool about these, I was thinking about it recently, Upper Deck is to hockey what Topps is to baseball. And as somebody who loves lineage and long lineages of sets in our hobby, Upper Deck, I believe now, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, has the second longest lineage of any brand in any sport in hobby history. Obviously, Topps Baseball is number 1. They have now exceeded a 75-year run of producing a licensed flagship baseball set. But Upper Deck, I think, is going to be second place now, starting with this 1990-91 set. So 35 years old and continuing all the way on to present day, where today they are the only brand with the exclusive license to produce NHL trading cards. So a 35-plus year run now for Upper Deck as a brand, and really, really happy to have this Upper Deck buyback of Guy Lafleur. I've shown these before for other players. These are not numbered, but they're very, very scarce. I believe there to be less than 20 copies of each. Maybe they did make 20 copies of each. That would kind of be cool, given that it's a 20th anniversary promotion. But as with many things in the world of buybacks, it is a great unknown. But what is known is that I love this Guy Lafleur, and this is one that I don't ever plan on parting with. And then we'll close out with an even cooler buyback if that's, at all possible, at least for this collector personally, because as I mentioned, this card, and again, this is my original childhood copy, the exact copy out of my binder. This was my first exposure to Guy Lafleur. And you can imagine my surprise when I found a few years back that in the O-Pee-Chee releases of the mid-2000s, they included buyback autograph cards of some of these 80s greats. And you got it. I was able to track down and acquire the authenticated pack-issued Guy Lafleur auto, originally from 89-90 O-Pee-Chee. Here is the sort of certificate of authenticity that came with it. You won't be able to make it out due to the hologram, but there is an authentication number on the bottom of this hologram, and that matches the authentication number in this hologram on the back of the card. So this is, to me, the ultimate Guy Lafleur, my single favorite Guy Lafleur card, because I love the combination of on-card auto that was pack issued combined with the nostalgia of looking at this card, which honestly transports me right back to the kitchen table in my parents' old house in Canterbury, Connecticut in the winter of 1989. So that's a wrap. Really appreciate anyone who's stuck with me here for 20 minutes of Guy Lafleur and other hockey card talk. I really, really appreciate it. I know there's tons of great content out there. I'll be back soon, as you know. And in the meantime, enjoy the hobby, everybody. Take care.